Okay, American National Government class, we're continuing here in with the PowerPoint for chapter 13 and 14. We're still talking about the administrative bureaucracy. So we're going to go to slide number 23. Let's talk about the Chevron USA Inc. versus National Resources Defense Council Inc. case. It's called in shorthand just simply the Chevron case. This is, again, remember when we talked about the Humphreys Executor case, what Humphreys Executors that case did, is basically an embedded administrative bureaucracies or administrative bureaucrats in their particular office beyond that particular president's term, or it's embedded them in such a way that perhaps they're not doing exactly what that president wants them to do. At the very least, what it did is it created an environment where once they're appointed into office, they're doing the work of legislators. In other words, they're writing laws, they're executing laws, and they're adjudicating laws. In other words, violating the separation of powers by working every day. So we're going to look at this case. This case was an issue where this case deals with administrative law, okay? And it dealt with a company, Chevron, that basically ran afoul of the Environmental Protection Agency. And because it ran afoul of the Environmental Protection Agency, it had to stand trial before a law court within the Environmental Protection Agency. In other words, within administrative agencies, they write laws, they execute laws, and then they adjudicate laws. In other words, they stand outside of Article 3 courts. Again, you've got the legislative branch, Article 1, the executive branch, Article 2, and then you've got the judicial branches, Article 3. Okay? If you look at your Constitution, where do you see administrative law courts under administrative agencies? You'll spend many fruitless hours looking for it because it's not there. Okay? So, but nevertheless, if you run afoul of an agency, in this case, Chevron ran afoul of the Environmental Protection Agency, it did not stand trial before an Article 3 court. It stood trial before a court embedded within the executive branch and that executive agency, Environmental Protection Agency. Okay, so I explain kind of the scenario like this, just kind of playfully. I'm just going to pick on somebody in the class. Okay, who am I going to pick on? I'll pick on Mary because I like Mary and she's a lot of fun to talk to. Okay, so think of Mary, she's not having a good day. She's not having a good week. In particular, she took Professor G's exam and didn't do well on it. So she's frustrated. Okay, she's having a bad week. She's frustrated. Things aren't going well. So she goes home and she just, because she's so upset, she doesn't do well on an exam, she comes home and she takes a couple of gallons of paint and she just goes off to the nearby river and just throws them into the river, okay? Because she's mad. Again, I'm being playful here, just having a little fun. So basically, she gets caught throwing these paint cans full of paint that are opened in the river, spilling out all over in the river. So she's run afoul of some Environmental Protection Agency laws, okay? So she's gonna have to stand before a court, okay? She will be hauled before, not an Article 3 court, before either a federal court if it was breaking a federal law, or a state court if it broke a particular state law regarding the environment. She would stand before the administrative law court within the Environmental Protection Agency. And so the danger or the concern she should have is the very judge that is adjudicating her case perhaps wrote the very law that she broke, and once they adjudicate the case and perhaps find her guilty, that judge is also going to execute the law, the full extent of the law, upon Mary. So in other words, Mary is standing before, in one person, a representative of the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. Okay? And so if Mary says, wait a minute, I don't agree with that ruling. Okay? First of all, I don't agree with this violation of the separation of powers, but that's not even the main issue. The main issue is, where can I go to get justice here? Because I don't think I'm going to get justice before a judge that wrote the law is going to execute the law. I'm going to appeal to an Article 3 court. Okay? what she's going to find because of the Chevron case in 1984 is that she cannot appeal to an Article III court outside that administrative law court. She is subject to the ruling of that administrative court, and that administrative court only. She cannot appeal. And that's exactly what the Chevron deference case basically ruled, is basically the court said this: the Supreme Court will defer to administrative agency rulings within their law courts unless those rulings are found to be unreasonable. Okay, so basically the burden of proof is going to be on Mary to prove that that ruling was unreasonable. And ever since 1984, it's been next to impossible for corporations or individuals who stand before an administrative law court under administrative agencies, if they don't like the ruling they get, to appeal to an Article III court to get justice. Okay, and so that's a very significant case, and again, you'll need to remember that for the exam. All right, well, let's move forward here on talking more about administrative agencies and things of that nature. Again, I already talked about this, but you can look at slide number 24, and one of the assumptions is within the progressives, when they began to initiate a lot of these administrative agencies and the enlargement of these bureaucracies, they thought that human nature was basically good. Okay, human nature is not sinful. Human nature is not corrupted. So because they thought human nature is basically good, you can give these administrative agencies, these administrative bureaucrats, more power. Okay, in other words, they're not going to be corrupt like politicians. The assumption is that they're going to be neutral. All right, they're not going to have a bias. They're not going to be conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican. Okay, some of the drawbacks of neutral competence we've got to be aware of. Again, the textbook talks about the agency point of view. The agency point of view by itself is bias. So, in other words, what they found is basically bureaucrats are people too. Okay, if politicians are people and they have bias, guess what? Bureaucrats are people too, last time I checked, and they've got bias as well. So you can see some of the drawbacks there in slide number 25. Human nature does not evolve from one generation to another. Okay, if humans were biased in 200 years ago or 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, they're going to be biased today, and they're going to be biased 500 years from now. Okay, human nature is fixed and permanent. Okay, other drawbacks of neutral competence. Again, government is people and people are flawed. Bureaucrats are people and people are flawed. Number 3, the agency point of view. Again, we've already talked about that bureaucrats tend to they place their agency's interests over other agencies and over the politicians that appoint them. Other problems with bureaucracies is that bureaucrats tend to oppose efforts to trim their programs. All right, and they're non-Republican in nature because they're unelected and they're unaccountable to the people. Okay, so I'm going to kind of rapid fire some of these other slides because some of these are fairly self-evident, but you can see the various types of agencies. If in our founding there was roughly 3,000 bureaucrats, today there's about 2.5 million employees at the federal level who are involved in the administrative bureaucracy, and you can see the various different kinds there. The mail, Social Security, defense systems, foodstuffs, stock markets, different things like that. And you can see the various sizes of it on slides 27, 28. You can see basically the size of local, state, and federal government as a percentage of the population there. Again, I'm not going to belabor that point. If you look at slide number 30, again, you can see there, you can see the 3 branches of government. If you look in the middle there, the executive branch, the president, vice president, the executive office of the presidency, and then you can see all the departments: Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, Department of Agriculture, and then all of these independent agencies that work under it. You can see just how large the executive branch actually is. So you can take a look at that there. If you look at basically the federal bureaucracy, generally there's 5 forms of it. You've got the cabinet departments. And again, if you look at the chart on page 30 or slide 30, you can see that there's cabinet departments, and then there's independent agencies, and then there's regulatory agencies, and then there's governmental corporations and presidential commissions. Okay, so let's talk about some of these here. If you look at slide number 32, you can see the cabinet. Okay, this is part of the agency there that are cabinet. Again, there's 15 of them. okay? And the head of each department is its secretary, all right? And they're responsible directly to the president, okay? The second aspect of agencies are independent agencies. They're like cabinets, but they have a narrower area of responsibility. Again, this is slide number 33. Take the CIA, take NASA, okay? Again, they report to the president, okay? Then you've got all these regulatory agencies. These regulatory agencies are created by Congress, and they regulate a particular sector of the economy, okay? Like the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, regulates the stock market and trading. The EPA regulates the environment and things of that nature, okay? They can develop law-like regulations and then judge whether individuals are complying with them. Again, very interesting because they are technically executive branch employees, but again, think Humphrey's executor, okay? Think that case, that has allowed these agencies to do lawmaking and judicial functions as well. And then you've got the various government corporations. They're like private corporations. They charge clients for their services, but they get government funding to help defray operating expenses. Okay, so you've got the Federal Deposit and Insurance Corporation that insures your deposits at local banks. Amtrak. Okay, a lot of people have said that, listen, if Amtrak was a private corporation, it most likely would have gone out of business decades ago. But because it's continually propped up by the federal government, it continues to stay in business. And then you've got presidential commissions, again, which are less important. But you can take over those slides, take a look at those slides. I'm not going to belabor these points. These are not as critical to understand. But I'll stop here and I will continue with the rest of this chapter.